You're watching Straight Line with Dan Rogers, President and CEO of Cherry Street Mission Ministries.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Line. I am the host, Molly Elrod, and I am here with Dan Rogers.
You are the host,
yes,
Molly.
I am.
Of course.
I just want to keep reiterating that.
Why not?
It's great to be back with you, Dan.
Yeah, and you as well.
Well, thanks. We have an exciting guest with us today, and I'm excited to talk to her because the role that she's in is the role that I started in the building, and Sarah is in our advocacy department for our Ready for Life program, and we're going to get some great behind the scenes of what she does on a daily basis as far as helping our guests reach their rock bottom and partnering with them, and what it looks like to be in Cherry Street Mission Ministries at our Sparrow's Nest.
Yeah, you know, today, well said, Molly. Today we're going to be taking a behind the scenes look at advocacy and how do our staff, particularly those who are tasked to, by assignment, be an advocate on behalf of other people. We're going to take a behind the scenes look at that. So in this case, Sarah, as you said, will be on stage with us, and we're going to get her talking about her life, how she got started at Cherry Street, why, and how God is using her yet today. How
has advocacy started and has since transformed in Cherry Street? Because it's not something that we've always offered at Cherry Street.
Yeah, certainly not by an exact function in terms of assignment, but you know, because Christ is our great advocate, I believe Cherry Street has always, from our inception, because of our desire to follow God, has always decided to advocate on behalf of the community, to stand in the gap, as we've said more than once, to stand in the fire of other people's choosing. But you're right, Molly, it's only been in the last few years that we have really formalized and intentionalized. One of the things I think we're going to get Sarah talking about is the training that has been offered, that she's gone through in order to be the kind of advocate for people that God needs her to be.
I never understood the word advocacy in the way I understood it now that I'm at Cherry Street. And I think one thing that I love about Cherry Street is the way we equip our guests to advocate for themselves, to participate in their own life, along with how we advocate for them on behalf of the resources that they need, and also to encourage them to advocate themselves to Christ.
Well, no question about it, because advocacy at Cherry Street, and certainly in the fire of other people's choosing or the hell of other people's choices, Molly, I think means a lot different than what most people would think advocacy is, because advocacy at Cherry Street, and certainly at this level of service, is really all about how not to give people things, but how to give people you. And the video that we have for our viewers today, take a look, because it tells our story pretty well.
Imagine being tossed into hell. Imagine standing there. Imagine the heat of it, the flame of it, the worry of it. Now imagine someone is standing right beside you, because they are. And you know they're not there for any other reason than you. That is Cherry Street Mission Ministries. We stand in the hell of other people's choosing on purpose.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are working at Sparrow's Nest, which is our women's facility in our advocacy department.
Yes, I am.
So can you tell us a little bit about what a day looks like for you? And then also, if you can give us a little background of how you got into Cherry Street in the first place.
Well, to start off with how a day looks for me, it's never the same day to day. Everything is always different. I can go in there with an itinerary saying this is what I plan to do for the day. Never does it stay that way. I at first was kind of frustrated with that. I'm I never reach my goals. I never do everything that I need to get done. But I work in the advocacy office, which is open to guests at any time. So most of the time, I'll be working on what I'm supposed to be working on, and a guest will have something that they need to speak about, which I've learned that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So even though I usually leave saying I've got 10 things on my list to do tomorrow, most of my day is spent meeting with guests, talking with them. I pray a lot with guests. I have a caseload of my own, and we usually, our one-on-ones consist of, mostly it's a personal conversation. We do some diagramming, which is really beneficial because most of them have never had the opportunity to do diagramming unless they're in a professional counseling outside of us. So we do a lot of cool stuff like genograms, which is like background, family history, because a lot of the issues that our guests have now, we have a lot of mental health issues and a lot of substance abuse issues, and a lot of them don't realize usually you can find that like in the roots of like family. It's a lot in the family history, things that they've experienced in their childhood, and some of these things are like hard to uncover unless you do some of this diagramming with them. So we do a lot of upstream, downstream. And the juniograms are usually my favorite. You learn so much about a guest just by going over their family background.
You bet. Well, Sarah, tell us about you. You're, young. You're getting started. You just graduated college. Your Cherry Street is now one of your first positions, really, as an advocate or as a trained social worker. But before we get there, tell us about you.
I grew up in a house that wasn't always, it was never perfect. I had an abusive father. So that was something that like I can relate to. A lot of our guests have experienced some type of abuse. The poverty is it hits really close to home. My parents divorced when I was 16. My dad went to jail. And my mother was a homemaker, so she never had a job before. So I was 16, my dad drained the bank account and left our family. And my mom went and got a job at Ruby Tuesday, and I remember she made $7.75 an hour.
Okay.
And supporting I have two sisters, so we have 3 children, and my mother on a $7.75 wage. She won the house in the divorce settlement, but the house payment was like $1,500 a month, and she's like, we'll never be able to keep
and
this house.
And how old at this time?
I was 16.
Okay.
I was 16, my older sister was 17, and my youngest sister was only 12.
Okay.
So I went out and got a job. That was my first job. I was 16, I got a job at Bob Evans, and it wasn't uncommon. I used to try not to have friends over because I would come home frequently and like the lights would be shut off because my mom couldn't pay the bill. So I learned at a very young age how to call DTE and give them my banking number and get the lights turned back on out of my checking account. So poverty hits close to home. I know what it's like to be, I never was actually homeless, but there were times where I thought for sure we were going to be. We didn't have money. I couldn't do much. When it came to like school dances and stuff like that, I wasn't allowed to attend because I never had money for dresses. So when it comes to certain like wants and needs that I see that our guests like are having to go without, I know what that's like. And
so when you have this upbringing and now you're at Cherry Street, what does life transformation look like for you? Because you probably never wanted anyone to label you as poor or as trash or as someone who couldn't afford something. You know, that's the adjectives, that's the what that we try to eliminate from our guests. So who have you found out that you are in Christ, and how do you encourage that in our guests?
I was very lucky. I had a very solid group of friends. So when I didn't have money for lunch, like my friend Nikki would like just quietly pay for my lunch, and I would always say, I'm not hungry, you know, I'm fine. And she would always like kind of quietly pay for my lunch. And so the thing is, here you see people seem to be very disconnected. And I thought for sure coming to Toledo, I'm from a very small town that's a little more close-knit, and I thought for sure coming to the big city in Toledo, like people wouldn't be caring. It's a big city and everybody's kind of out for their own. And actually being at Cherry Street, I've seen the opposite of that. The community steps in and helps so much. A recent example with the water crisis.
Yes.
We had so much water that we were trying to find places to store it, and we had people calling constantly. Like every phone call was, "You guys need water? Do you guys need anything? Can we help in any way?" So I thought for sure, big city.
And the we were talking about, Sarah, just for our viewers, is you're assigned to Sparrow's Nest, and you were having because you know we live on the lake, and there's always going to be some kind of a water crisis in some way in our region. And during that one crisis recently, you're saying that our donors in our community, who, by the way, were thirsty themselves, right?
Absolutely.
Because this was not a homeless issue or an addiction issue. This was actually a thirst issue. In the middle of their own thirst, dropped off water, and that's the kind of community you're talking about.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is not what I expected in the big city. I always thought big city, harsh.
Right.
But no, people are very, very giving, very compassionate. I don't see our guests mistreated very much. The community, they're fantastic, which is the last thing I expected, but they're awesome.
Well, during that water crisis, we had guests, staff, volunteers, and everybody working right along, as the picture a moment ago just showed, right along the same street, passing out water. And for just a minute in our community, there was no such thing as poverty and homelessness, because we all thirsted at the same time and in the same way.
That's right.
Now, going back to Molly's question about you, Sarah, usually people who have had the kind of background that you have had and now working in the field that you are working are doing that because they're trying to make up for some wound that still exists in their own life. But that's probably not you. Why have you chosen to be an advocate at Cherry Street Mission Ministries when you know, as you said by your own admission, it now hits close to home? So why be in the same field? You would think, that's it. I'm going to get as far away from this nonsense as I can possibly get. But you haven't. You've actually reversed order, and you're now running into the fire. You're now running into the same problem you grew up with. Why?
My intention was upon finding an internship. I wasn't originally supposed to be at Cherry Street Mission Ministries. I was actually scheduled to be a counselor at a school with a social worker there. And then things changed. She had her master's in counseling, not in social work. So last minute, I'm scrambling to find an internship. And this one just so happened to be available. I interviewed for it. I kind of really liked it there. Last thing that I expected is to be working with this population. I never expected, it was just happened.
So when you started your social work studies, you did not have in the back of your mind, I'm going to work with the homeless, the addicted.
No.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And upon coming here, I don't know what to expect because my family was not a wealthy family, but we were in a small neighborhood. This is big city homelessness.
Yeah.
And my first time coming here, I was just surprised at how many people were here without homes. And even though I live not that far away, it's a huge difference. And so when I first started here, I wasn't anticipated to work with homeless and poverty. It wasn't my plan. But I did my internship here. I was here for 4 months, and I fell in love with it, which is the last thing I expected. I thought, my kids, my gigs. I want to work with kids, but this population is for me. These are not homeless people. They're not poverty-ridden people. These people are survivors, and they come from so many different backgrounds, and they all have so many wonderful stories. And I work with just the women, but these women have some wonderful stories, and they're very inspirational.
It sounds like, though, Sarah, your life has changed.
Oh, my life has absolutely changed.
As a result of serving at Cherry Street Mission Ministries.
It absolutely has changed.
Did you expect it to change?
I didn't. At first I was kind of irritated. I'm like, this isn't what I don't want to go to the big city. I'm from a little country town. I'm like, the big city is not for me. And at first I was like, with having the groups of people outside of the building, I was even afraid to walk up the steps. I'm like, oh man, this is really scary. And now I find myself punching in late because I'm out there like, hey, you guys, what's going on? What's new? What did I miss?
Yeah.
Does anybody need anything? And usually I'm running in last minute to try to punch in on time. But before I would hurry up and duck and cover and hurry up and get in. But you develop a relationship with these people. And I've learned so much from them. And my daughter probably says it best. She's 6 years old. And at their school they do bucket fillers and bucket dippers. And
what is that?
a bucket filler is somebody who compliments and does nice things for people.
Yeah.
And so they're filling other people's buckets, and in return, your bucket is filled. A bucket dipper is somebody who does negative things, and in return, your bucket is taken from. And so she asked me, she's like, well, Mom, what do you do? I'm like, well, there's lots of people who have had bad things happen to them, and they don't have homes, they don't have jobs, they don't have money to buy the things that they need. They don't even have food. So what we do is we have a place for these people to eat, we have a place for them to stay, and then Mom gets to talk to them, have conversations with them, and help figure out how we can rebuild. And so she's like, your job is a bucket filler. And I'm like, you're kind of right. I do.
6 years old.
Yes. And so she said, Mom, your bucket is overflowing.
Wow.
And that kind of says it best, that my bucket is overflowing because I get to do these things every day. I get to work with people and develop a relationship. So it's a give and receive. They give me just as much as I give them.
You've talked so much about relationship, and I think so many of our guests and those who come to us in need find that it's a void in their life. So how have you found value in our guests and in returning that trust? And I think that when you do build that trust, they begin to understand that they can start working on themselves and they can confide in you and really get to their rock bottom because you are standing with them, as we've been talking about in this episode, standing in that hell with them. So what does that look like for you as far as building that relationship and trust ongoing?
It's amazing when you look at the difference from the first one-on-one you have with a guest. It's very surface. They don't trust you with much information. A lot of these people have been very hurt. and they're pretty closed off and don't really have much to say to you. Throughout time, and usually it doesn't even take much time, it's mostly just general conversation. Eventually they learn to trust you, and then what would normally be their yellow tape issues, things that they're very uncomfortable talking about, the construction zones in their life, places they've been hurt, eventually you get there and you get to talk to them about it, where on a normal basis they're not really willing to talk to people about that. So when you have a conversation about places that you've been hurt or you've been harmed, which I've even found this like in my own life because of the abusive situation I was in, there are times when a conversation, it's difficult for me to have, and sometimes it gets uncomfortable, but these are things that need to be talked about, and it's amazing that you can develop such a good relationship with these people that they trust you with this information, that they want to have these conversations. The most difficult conversations that you have, a lot of addiction issues, like those are the very, very tough ones. I've been with guests who are they're trying to withdraw from heroin and stuff like that, and that is somebody's hell.
Well, these are very complex, issues. Addiction is really a subsidy, so if you've got an addiction going on in your life, you're subsidizing something.
It's a form of self-medication.
Exactly, and for all of us, that subsidy can take various forms. Sarah and Molly, sometimes it's working. Sometimes our addiction can just work. And work and work and work because we're subsidizing something that's missing in our lives. In other people, as you mentioned a moment ago, it becomes even more complex when we introduce heroin, or we introduce alcohol, or promiscuity, or sexuality in some form, and then, depending on what we've chosen to fill that subsidy in our lives, or be that subsidy in our life, depends on how far we spiral. You said a few things to our viewers a moment ago, like yellow tape and deep into the pool and things like that, which of course is inside Cherry Street information, not that it's private, you guys can hear it all. But speak to us about, you did get your LSW, your licensed social worker degree, and but yet you have also found out that Cherry Street has very intense training.
Very intense
Talk to our
training.
viewers about that training.
The very first training I went to, I was an intern, and I had a fellow intern friend who'd showed up before, and she said, Sarah, they're saying it's some type of freezer training, bring your jacket.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh gosh, what are they gonna do to us? Like, bring my jacket.
Yeah.
And so I come in wearing my coat.
Because you think, well, that's a metaphor.
I don't know.
Freezer training is
She said we're going into a freezer. Like, I heard we're going into a freezer, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you're crazy. And so I brought my coat in, and then I get in, the first thing you say is, everybody who's wearing a jacket or a sweater, take it off and just wear your t-shirt.
Right.
And we literally went into the freezer. And at first I'm like, what is this? Like, what point is this going to prove? And so we got in the freezer, and it's dark and it's quiet. And for the first few minutes, I was just like, this is pointless. But then after a few minutes, I was like, what is he doing? Like, this is lonely, and this is cold, and this is kind of scary. And that was kind of the point. Like,
it was.
This is, it's being homeless. Like, it's lonely, it's cold, and it's scary, and you don't know what's around you, and you don't know what's coming. But that was just like one example of the training, part of the training. And then just learning how to even conversate with our guests. You've been very thorough in teaching us like the things that you need to ask. Some of the things that you need to ask a guest, they're uncomfortable, and kind of finding like the roundabout ways to get to the bottom issue.
Right.
Upstream, downstream has been, I've used that with every single guest that I've had. And that's basically just trying to find like the root of the problem, because somebody usually doesn't just start using heroin out of the blue.
Right.
A person doesn't start drinking at the age of 12 for no reason. There's usually always an issue, and sometimes if if you don't really try to find what the root cause was, or maybe you do know what the root cause is, but you've just never been willing to work on it, like, these trainings are very important to have. I'm still not a master at it like you are. I've seen you do some rescue intensive that was just amazing, but the trainings have been very beneficial. The acronyms, or the axioms, have been, those are really cool. I remember thinking the first time I'm looking at the board, and one of the axioms is the can. It's not just there.
The can in the middle of the field. Right?
Yes, and I remember thinking, like, what is this? Like, a can in the field it means something. I'm like, yeah, it means there's a can in the field. Like, what are you looking for?
Right.
And then we talked about how a can in the field, if nobody inquires why it's there, why is it there?
Yeah.
But people will just keep passing it by, there's a can in the field. Like that was my initial thought. Well, there's a can in the field. It's not mine. I didn't put it there.
Right.
And then your thing was, well, then who did?
Right.
You know, it's just been things like
what
that.
will we do about it? You know, will we
Right.
continue?
Right.
Yeah, the axiom is, and you're right to bring it up, the axiom that you're referring to is the can in the middle of the field means something. That thing we keep walking past every single day is there for a reason. And there's a reason why we keep choosing to ignore it. But it's a slow down moment, right?
It is.
Sarah, in just a few moments that we have left with you, what is one of the great challenges? And then tell us one of the great joys you experience as an advocate at Cherry Street Mission Ministries.
Probably the thing that I struggle with most. My past is it's really hard. Coming from an abusive home, I mean, it hits a nerve. And when you're talking to a guest, it's a one-on-one, and they're talking about situations that were similar. My focus is on them because this is a one-on-one. This is for them. And sometimes I find myself like, oh, like what they just said really, like it really hit close to home.
Right.
And sometimes it's difficult for me to like take a step back and say, this is about you. Like I've healed from my situation. Sometimes it still hurts. It always will hurt. But that's probably what I struggle with most. And just like some of our guests have had so much hurt and so much pain in their lives, and just like their one-on-ones, seeing it in their eyes and hearing it in their voice, it's hard. I mean, there are things that a lot of our guests have experienced that it's very difficult to hear. Probably one of the best joys that I've had, a couple people from my caseload have moved to what is called the restore phase.
Okay.
Which means that they've made it through the rescue phase, which is the 30-day sequester where they're in building. That means they've kept clean drug tests, they've completed all of our biblical training, all of our educational training, and they've moved on to the next phase. We decide who moves on to the restore phase during MDTs. Which is when all the staff members get together and we discuss everything, because everybody interacts with the guests in different ways. People who are on my caseload still work with other people.
Yeah.
They still talk with other people. So we all see different things. And I think probably that's my favorite, is watching guests move on to the restore phase, because that is a unified agreement that this guest is getting better and they're moving on and they're making good decisions, because at that point they're no longer sequestered, so they're allowed to go out and navigate, and some of them go out and get jobs. And so I mean, it's a big deal, because it means they're getting better, and what we're doing is helping.
And you're still standing with the guest and partnering them with going to the restore phase, but also if they need more time, you know, that is one thing that's awesome about the program, is the timelessness, you know, that God is timeless with us and that you are timeless with the guest however long it needs to take, because we are individuals. So that's awesome.
I also do love a lot of guests who even had left prior to me being there. Some of them will call and just say, hey, I'm still sober and I'm doing really well. And I always love getting those. Even if I don't know who they are, I'm like, yay you, like you're doing wonderful. But they'll call and check in just to say, hey, I'm still doing really great.
You know, it's interesting. I was walking through a parking lot at the mall the other day, and this happens all the time. I know it happens with so many of the staff at Cherry Street Mission Ministries, but I was walking through and I'm hearing, hey, Mr. Rogers, hey, Mr. And, you know, I'm looking, because I'm like, I don't know who's, you know, until I find the person who's yelling at me from like rows away. And so we connect, and here it's one of our guests that I've not seen for 5 years, clothed, in her right mind, healthy, has children, and shopping at the mall. I mean, come on, it's wonderful to watch a life restored. You know, Cherry Street Mission Ministries, and by the way, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being with us today. Like Sarah, Cherry Street Mission Ministries has always been about people. Take a quick look.
You know, Cherry Street Mission Ministries from 1947 until this very day has always been about people. You people like you, people that come through our doors for a wide range of reasons. So when you financially and prayerfully support Cherry Street, you are actually making an investment in life revitalization. And I think one of the cool things about that is we're all about revitalizing and transforming every life that comes through one of our doors, no matter what the reason. That's the great thing about your support and your investment of Cherry Street, is the way that lives are transformed and changed.
You know, investment is such a key word in our community, because when you invest at Cherry Street Mission Ministries, you are investing, believe it or not, in folks just like Sarah that you saw a moment ago. Did you hear her story? think about how when you pray and when you financially support Cherry Street Mission Ministries, I'll bet you've not thought about, I'm supporting Sarah. I'm supporting a single mom whose life is transformed, just like anyone else's life has been transformed. You saw Sarah's life, you see the work that you do every single day. Can you imagine being a part of something more dynamic than supporting Cherry Street Mission Ministries? And I will tell you that I believe that Cherry Street is among our regions, among the region's most finest institutions, and I'm proud to say that we live in a community that is full of fantastic institutions, and Cherry Street's one of them. What makes Cherry Street fantastic is the way that our community from 1947 until today has decided, Cherry Street, you will exist on our behalf. And so I'm happy to tell you that Cherry Street now, completely for nearly 70 years, is so completely supported by your gift, by your prayer, by your support, by your volunteerism. We take no government dollars or no federated dollars in any way. We are a pure expression of the way that you support Cherry Street Mission Ministries. Do yourself a favor, will you? Go to straightlinetoledo.org and make a contribution, will you? Make a contribution of your time, of your value, of your volunteerism. Make a contribution to life revitalization, and watch how you can change lives like Sarah and countless others like that woman that I saw in the parking lot just a few days ago. It's an amazing thing how we collaboratively work together as God's hands and feet within a community. You know, Molly, during today's segment with Sarah, you know, it dawned on me, you started as an advocate at Cherry Street Mission Ministries.
I did.
At Sparrow's
It
Nest.
hit close to home, yeah, 3 years ago actually.
How did it change your life?
Oh, man, I think that the craziest and best thing about God is that when we say yes to Him, we say yes to Him. All means all. And even though we don't know what that looks like, you're still in for the ride. And a lot of times people I hear, and I said it too, I want God to do something through me at Cherry Street. And when you come to Cherry Street, guest, staff, volunteer, whoever, God does something to you before He does something through you. And
Well, isn't that great?
And it is. It's awesome. And I know that He'll keep working on me because it's a work in progress. Would I ever want to go back and have Him do it again? No. But,
Well,
the transformation.
we'll see how it goes, Molly.
Right. But the transformation that happens
Of
is
course.
just awesome.
Of course. And I will put my hat in the same ring. I've been at Cherry Street for 13 years, and I'm telling you, my life has completely changed and transformed because of the ministry of Cherry Street. You can follow us on conversation with my blog at straightlinenow.wordpress.com and join the conversation. Molly, thanks for your contributions today.
Dan, thanks so much for having me. And we want to thank Sarah, too, for joining us today. It was awesome having her with us to talk about advocacy. And thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Straight Line. I am your host, Molly. Dan, thanks for being here.